In 1789, France was the most powerful kingdom in the Western world. Its king lived in a palace with 2,000 rooms and 20,000 servants. Its aristocracy wore diamonds to breakfast. Its philosophers were the envy of every intellectual in Europe. 4 years later, the king's head was rolling across a wooden platform in front of a cheering crowd. The queen's head followed 9 months after that, and the revolution that promised liberty, equality, and fraternity had devoured, in its own words, more than 40,000 of its own citizens. This is the story of how a civilization turns on itself, how idealism becomes terror, and how the most radical political experiment in modern history ended by handing total power to a single man. His name was Napoleon, but we'll get to him. To understand the French Revolution, you need to understand one number, 98. That's the percentage of the French population that belonged to what was called the Third Estate, everyone who was not a nobleman or a member of the clergy. The other 2%, the aristocracy and the church, owned most of the land, paid almost no taxes, and held almost all the political power. For generations, this arrangement had been justified by the divine order of things. God had placed kings above nobles, nobles above commoners, and commoners above no one. Your position in society was not an accident, it was the will of heaven. But by the 1780s, that argument was wearing thin. The French Enlightenment had spent decades producing philosophers, Voltaire, Rousseau, Montesquieu, who asked uncomfortable questions. What if kings were not chosen by God? What if power belonged to the people? What if inequality was not divine, but simply unjust? These ideas were spreading fast, and they were landing in a country under enormous pressure. France was essentially bankrupt. A series of expensive wars, including the American Revolution, which France had funded despite Britain, had emptied the treasury. The harvests of 1788 had failed catastrophically. Bread prices had skyrocketed. The average Frenchman was spending 80% of his income just on bread. People were hungry, people were angry, and for the first time in French history, people had a language to express that anger, the language of rights. In May 1789, King Louis XVI did something unusual. Desperate for money, he called a meeting of the Estates General, a body that hadn't met in 175 years, to discuss new taxes. It didn't go as planned. The representatives of the Third Estate, the 98%, arrived with lists of grievances from their constituents. They wanted change, real change, and when they were locked out of their meeting hall on June 20th, they didn't go home. They gathered in a nearby tennis court and made a vow. They would not disband until France had a new constitution. The tennis court oath sent a shockwave through Versailles. Louis XVI, indecisive and out of touch, didn't know what to do. Then, on July 14, 1789, rumors spread through Paris that the king was massing troops to crush the rebellion. The people of Paris didn't wait to find out. They stormed the Bastille, a fortress and prison that had become the symbol of royal tyranny, tore it apart stone by stone, and carried the governor's head through the streets on a pike. The revolution had begun. Within weeks, the system that had governed France for centuries was collapsing. Nobles fled the country. The National Assembly abolished feudalism in a single night. The Declaration of the Rights of Man, one of the most extraordinary documents in history, proclaimed that all men were born free and equal in rights. It was, in every sense, a new world. For a brief moment, it seemed like France might achieve something remarkable. A constitutional monarchy, a system of rights, a peaceful transformation. Louis XVI appeared to accept the changes. He wore the revolutionary tricolor. He spoke of being the father of his people. He was lying. In June 1791, Louis and his family attempted to flee France and reach the Austrian border, where his wife, Marie Antoinette's nephew, the Emperor of Austria, was waiting with an army. They were caught at a town called Varennes, just miles from the border. They were brought back to Paris under guard, surrounded by silent, furious crowds. The attempted flight changed everything. If the king had stayed, France might have found a way to coexist with its monarchy. But now the mask was off. The king had shown that he would rather invite a foreign army to crush his own people than accept a constitution. Trust evaporated overnight. Meanwhile, the revolution was consuming itself. Radical factions fought moderate factions. Newspapers multiplied and screamed for blood. Clubs and committees competed for control of the streets. In Paris, the most radical revolutionaries, the Jacobins, led by a cold, incorruptible lawyer named Maximilien Robespierre, were gaining power. And across the border, the monarchies of Europe were watching with growing alarm. If revolution could topple the French king, it could topple any king. In April 1792, France declared war on Austria. Prussia joined on Austria's side. Foreign armies marched toward Paris. The revolution was now fighting for its life. On January 21, 1793, Louis XVI was guillotined in the Place de la Révolution in Paris. He was 38 years old. He died with dignity, attempting to address the crowd, but the drums drowned out his words. 9 months later, Marie Antoinette followed him to the guillotine. She was 37. And then, the revolution turned on its own people. The Committee of Public Safety, effectively a 12-man dictatorship led by Robespierre, declared that France was surrounded by enemies, inside and outside. Anyone who questioned the revolution was an enemy of the people. Anyone who hesitated was a traitor. What followed is known as the Reign of Terror. Between September 1793 and July 1794, 10 months, roughly 17,000 people were officially executed by guillotine. Another 25,000 died in prisons or were killed in extrajudicial massacres across the country. Priests, aristocrats, peasants who resisted conscription, women who sold bread at the wrong price, former revolutionaries who had become too moderate or not moderate enough. In the city of Lyon, which had rebelled against the Jacobin government, the guillotine worked too slowly. Robespierre justified it all in the language of virtue. The revolution, he said, was building a republic of pure citizens, and impurity had to be purged. He was, in his own mind, not a monster. He was a doctor, performing surgery on the body of France. But the logic of the terror had no natural end. Once you began searching for hidden enemies of the revolution, you found them everywhere, including among your allies. One by one, the men who had led the revolution were themselves accused, arrested, and executed. Georges Danton, one of the founding heroes of the revolution, was guillotined in April 1794. As he mounted the scaffold, he reportedly told the executioner, "Show my head to the people, it is worth seeing." In July 1794, the revolution finally turned on Robespierre himself. His colleagues, terrified that they were next, arrested him on the floor of the National Convention. The following day, he was guillotined, without trial, without ceremony. The terror was over. What came after the terror was a period of exhaustion, corruption, and political drift known as the Directory. France had been at war for years. The economy was in ruins. The political system cycled through factions that rose and fell with dizzying speed. The people who had stormed the Bastille, dreaming of liberty, were now simply tired. Into this vacuum stepped a young Corsican general who had made his name crushing royalist uprisings and winning spectacular victories in Italy and Egypt. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. On November 9, 1799, in a coup known as 18 Brumaire, Napoleon dissolved the Directory and declared himself First Consul of France. Within 5 years, he would declare himself emperor. The revolution that had destroyed a king to liberate the people had ended by creating something uncomfortably similar, a single man with absolute power ruling France. And yet, it wasn't quite the same. Napoleon preserved many of the revolution's core achievements: equality before the law, religious tolerance, the abolition of feudal privileges, a modern legal code, the Napoleonic Code, that would influence legal systems across the world for centuries. The revolution had not failed entirely, but it had not succeeded as its dreamers had imagined. The French Revolution is one of the most debated events in history precisely because it contains so many contradictions. It gave the world its most powerful language of human rights, and it used that language to justify mass murder. It destroyed a system of entrenched privilege, and it replaced it with new forms of power that were in some ways just as dangerous. It produced the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the guillotine. Historians have argued for 2 centuries about what the revolution really means. Was it a triumph of human liberation? A catastrophic failure of idealism? A warning about what happens when ideology becomes absolute? Perhaps it is all three. What is undeniable is this: the French Revolution created the modern political world. The concepts we now take for granted, popular sovereignty, individual rights, the idea that governments derive their legitimacy from the people, all passed through Paris in those 10 years. Every revolution since, the American, the Russian, the Chinese, the Cuban, has been measured against the French, and every society that has tried to build a new world on the ruins of an old one has had to confront the same terrible question the Jacobins could not answer. When does the pursuit of justice become injustice? The French Revolution promised to free humanity from tyranny. Instead, it showed us that tyranny has no single face, that it can wear the mask of a king, or the mask of a committee, or the mask of a general on a white horse. If this video made you think, please hit like and drop a comment. I read every single one. The next video is about another empire that fell in a single day, and how its collapse changed the entire course of Western civilization. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. History doesn't end, it just keeps turning.